I'm Jason Klom, and this is the Comedy on Vinyl podcast. Welcome to the Comedy on Vinyl miniseries Family Albums, Episode 8, Dick Davy, Part 3. In my first episode about Dick Davy, you might recall that one of the many things that endeared Dick Davy to me was his ability to pad a resume in a creative way. He and I both built up our acting CVs with an impressive-sounding extra gig or two, or several, as in my case. Not long after the first Dick Davy episode, I stumbled upon an article written by Wisconsin historian Stephen K. Hauser that made me feel even further kinship to Dick. As it turns out, while he was on tour, he would sometimes come back through Wisconsin, and eventually he established a relationship with a local DJ known as Dr. Bob. Years before, Davy had spent a lot of time in the Wisconsin area, performing at synagogues as Richard Davy, and eventually performing with the Western-themed folk group the 10-Gallon Trio. When he was doing club dates and promoting his records almost a decade later, he'd stop by radio station WAWA and hang out for a show with Dr. Bob. And eventually the two started promoting Dick's appearances with a fake campaign for the White House, with Dr. Bob running for president and Davy as his running mate. Since 2004, I've been running a fake campaign for the presidency. That turned into a book, a couple of movies, and soon another podcast. At the same time, I've also been working with my friend and former Comedy on Vinyl guest Matt Sachs on a documentary on the vice presidency. My obsession with this office was my first research addiction, so the idea that Dick Davy was playing this character of a VP in waiting made me endlessly curious. It added a new layer to what I already knew about him. So I asked Stephen Hauser if he'd sit down with me and finally give me the perspective of a fan who heard Dick while he was still performing. The perspective of someone who only knew Dick Davy from what was presented to the public. Fortunately, he kindly agreed. So here's my interview with Stephen K. Hauser on the phone from Wisconsin. And stick around after the interview. We've got some exciting news from the Dick Davy archive you won't want to miss.
Well, I'm a lifelong Wisconsinite and fifth generation here in the Badger State. I was a fan of pop music back in the mid-1960s, as every teenager was. And before I got interested in rock and roll records, I was interested in comedy albums. I think my interest in comedy albums started when Vaughn Meader's first Family album came out when I was 10 years old in 1962. And I remember buying that album and just thinking that was the greatest thing in the world. I loved the political humor of it, and even though I was just a kid, I thought that was great. Well, I ended up being a fan of everybody from Alan Sherman to Bill Dana to Don Adams and some of the others who had really great comedy recordings in the 60s. I still find those old albums funny today. Well, by the time I was a little older, I was buying records by the Searchers and the Rolling Stones and the Dave Clark Five, and had moved beyond the comedy albums. But I also had developed an interest in soul music and started listening to Milwaukee's WAWA radio, which played the R&B hits of the day, which often weren't played in those days on Top 40 radio. I'll give you one example of that. Percy Sledge's great hit, When a Man Loves a Woman, was a monster record, a number one record on Billboard, by the way. Mm-hmm. It never charted on the two Top 40 stations in Milwaukee, WOKY and WRIT, but it was a top 10 hit on WAWA. Well, so there were certain records you could hear there that you couldn't hear anywhere else. That was a 1966 release. So by mid-66, I'm listening to WAWA, and that was my exposure to Dick Davy. The most popular disc jockey on WAWA radio was Dr. Bob, an African-American DJ from Ohio who had been hired at WAWA, had come to Milwaukee, and had developed quite a following, both in the black and white communities of that day, and did a lot of CYO dances. In fact, became very popular as a personality to come and attend these dances and be part of the be part of the scene for the kids. Spun a lot of records. He spun the soul records, but he spun the top 40 hits as well of the day. And he started to play excerpts from Dick Davy's albums. The first album that Dick Davy did, You're a Long Way from Home, Whitey, live at the Apollo. That album was released in August of '66 by Columbia Records. In fact, it came out around the same time as the Byrds' third album, and it began to get some airplay on Dr. Bop's program. Dr. Bop did play comedy records. He played some Pigmeat Markham, some Mom's Mabley, and Dick Davy was a little bit different because he was edgy, he was politically astute, he was a topical comic, and his style was just kind of this wandering style of presenting one thing after another, seemingly disconnected stories and facts that somehow wove together to make a very long, shaggy dog story into a joke. Well, anyway, Dick's album was funny, and it was funny in a gentle sort of way. And I think people today might not understand that some of the anger that you see in political humor today, or at least that I see in it, was absent from that humor in the mid-'60s, even as turbulent a decade as that was. Dick's humor was friendly. It was an aw shucks kind of disarming gentleness, but he made his point. And that album was played on WAWA. And then the next album, interestingly enough, Stronger Than Dirt, the second Columbia album, did not come out until the fall of 1967, over a year later. And by that time, of course, Dr. Bop played that one as well, and I imagine Dick Davy or somebody at Columbia heard that this record was getting plugged on WAVA, and he came here as part of a personal appearance tour. And that was where the whole genesis of Dr. Bop's presidential campaign came in. Dr. Bop decided he was going to run for president of the United States, in the way Pat Paulson did, or actually in the way Mark Twain did back in the 1880s when he launched a faux presidential campaign and did it just to lampoon the bigwigs of his time. Well, Dr. Bop decided he was going to run for president as the WAWA Soul Power candidate, printed up some buttons and bumper stickers, and when Dick Davy arrived in town, he was coronated, you might say, as Dr. Bop's running mate. And so he became the vice presidential candidate on Dr. Bop's ticket. They appeared on the radio together and swapped jokes and one-liners. And Dr. Bop took Dick Davy around to the local high schools, to especially some of those schools in the inner city community that were predominantly black high schools, and had him talk to the school assemblies.
Wow.
And it was at that time that the Milwaukee Journal newspaper, which was one of our two daily newspapers in Milwaukee at that time, and was the one with the larger circulation, decided to write a story about it all. And Michael Drew, who was their reporter for all things news and television and radio and media, decided to put this in his Milwaukee studio notes column. And he did an interview with Dr. Bop and Dick Davy, and I still remember the beginning of that. Most of this year's presidential aspirants are being coy about their intentions, but not one Milwaukeean. And then it goes on from there and talks about their rather tongue-in-cheek presidential efforts, and there was a picture of Dick Davy and Dr. Bop together in the article. Anyway, all of that is long ago. I know that Dick Davy always claimed to be a small-town hillbilly, actually, is what he called himself, from Arkansas, from Evening Shade, Arkansas. And there really is such a place. It's actually in northern Arkansas, north-central Arkansas, just south of Mammoth Springs, up near the Missouri border. And the last time I checked, I think there were 300 and 400 people living there. But since then, there's been a book published, Gold Mine's Comedy Record Price Guide, which was written or compiled at least by Ronald Smith. And that book is great for anyone like myself who still collects old comedy albums and still finds them amusing.
Yeah.
Well, that book came out in 1996, about 20 years ago. And in the book, there's a listing for Dick Davy. And Smith says that Dick Davy was a Jewish comedian from New York City.
Yeah.
Now, that was news to me.
Uh-huh.
And it means that he did a pretty good Arkansas accent for a New York City fellow.
Yeah.
If that's true, he created a persona or a character that was very convincing. I mean, everybody knew that the drawl and the pregnant pauses in his delivery were exaggerated for comedic effect.
Sure.
But as far as the voice, it was pretty much spot on. I've known people from Arkansas, and he sounded like them to me. But if it was indeed a character, it was a masterful creation. And I would put it on a level with Hal Holbrook doing Mark Twain Tonight.
For sure.
I've seen Hal Holbrook do that show on stage. And I'll tell you, you see Mark Twain. You don't see Hal Holbrook when he's on stage doing that role. In a comedic sense, this might be a lot closer to Bill Dana's creation of Jose Jimenez, or to the creation of Charlie Weaver by Cliff Arquette.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people never even knew there was a Cliff Arquette. They
Right.
thought Charlie Weaver was Charlie Weaver. And it was partly because those characters that they created were so three-dimensional in their enactment that they really became those people. And that's what's remarkable for me. Now, for the last 38 years, I've been a college history professor, which is how I've learned to talk in 50-minute increments without losing my flow of consciousness here. But as somebody who's taught college history for a long time, for verging on 40 years, I can tell you that I understand the place of comedy in history, and it is very much a reflection of who we are. The comedian is somebody that holds a mirror up to society, at least if he's any good. And I think Dick Davy did that very well. And as I said earlier, he did it in a way that was gentle, that was not accusatory, that was not nasty. I don't think there was any nastiness in Dick Davy. But he pointed out the foibles of everybody, and he made fun of his audiences, both left and right, both black and white, both liberal and conservative. I think everybody got skewered a little bit here and there, and he had fun doing it, and his audience, at least according to the reaction on the records, seemed to enjoy it as well. He made a few appearances on Merv Griffin's show. In fact, in reviewing these albums, in preparing to talk to you, I saw that Griffin had written the liner notes on the back of the first album.
Right.
But it's interesting that his appearances on that show apparently are cut out of the syndicated versions that they're showing on the oldies television stations. I saw one
so strange.
Rather recently, and his segment was removed from the show. Although the show was originally 90 minutes, it was shown in a 60-minute format.
Oh, okay, interesting. I wonder what their reason would have been for cutting it. Maybe they just because nobody knows.
Got to feed more commercials in there too.
For sure.
But he did show up. He was still on the couch at the end when they dismissed and wandered off the stage. There was Dick Davy with everyone else, and he was on the show. And I'm assuming that since that episode was preserved, there's probably a fuller version of it somewhere in the can that somebody could see if they burrowed for it.
Yeah, I've been wondering the
another
same
thing about Dick Davy.
Mm-hmm.
There's almost the style of the Southern Preacher with the guy. He ended the Stronger Than Dirt album with a quote from Isaiah 11, and it's actually a misquote. It's a paraphrase. Everybody talks about the lion laying down with the lamb, and that's actually from a very famous painting showing the lion and the lamb together, but it's from the Old Testament book of Isaiah, where the prophet talks about the wolf shall dwell with the lamb, and the leopard shall lie down with the kid, and the calf and the young lion and the fatling together. And all of this is about the coming peace of the world in some future post-apocalyptic age. So the guy knew his scriptures too. And for an African American audience at that time, the black church has always been very familiar with the Scripture, more so, I think, than the white mainstream Orthodox Christian churches. In fact, the one exception to that would be the Baptists. Regardless of their racial background, are pretty knowledgeable on their Scriptures. But for a black audience at that time, I think they knew where he was coming from when he quoted the Scriptures.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, there are a number of things that you brought up that you're absolutely right. So that was one of those things that kind of stood out to me and to Cliff Nesteroff, was that this guy was doing this voice. But the thing is, this voice, I'm assuming he didn't break that at all on the radio, because I've spoken to people who knew him socially, and he didn't break the voice socially, which is... I don't know what to make of that, and I'll never know. I'll never get an answer on it, but that was a character he kept up. But, yeah, I mean, I've also since spoken to his family, and his family has, they're like, we don't know where the accent came from. We're not sure why he chose Arkansas. He did own some land in Arkansas at one point, but there are a lot of gaps. But his father was a very famous rabbi in New York. He was a very well-known rabbi and a big pacifist, which makes sense. I think a lot of that got passed on to Dick Davy. So his real name was Richard Hoffman. That was Richard David Hoffman. That was his real name. But what's so funny is, like, of all the stuff that I dug up about him, I still don't know. There's still a lot of gaps as to why he went that way in comedy, why he went character. I'm not 100% sure. So I'm assuming you got to listen to. Did you hear all of the interviews on the radio with him and Dr. Bob?
Well, I don't have any of the old tapes. The funny thing is, I used to tape Dr. Bob's show because it was the best way to hear all the 45s you couldn't afford to buy.
Oh, sure, yeah.
It's amazing to look back on that and remember that I could get a 45 RPM record for 69 cents, and I couldn't afford more of them. That would be amazing.
Right.
But I did tape them, but all of those old reel-to-reel tapes I had were long ago taped over again and again. Sure. As you used to do back then. You remember a reel-to-reel tape for a tape recorder cost you about $4 or $5.
Oh, sure.
And if you had a little tape recorder, you could get them a little cheaper, but the fact is that you would economize by using the same one. So I don't have them, but I do remember him being interviewed on the radio, and I also remember Dr. Bob playing excerpts from his albums and breaking in the middle of the routine. And that's my running mate. That's my running mate. And there was a break-in style that Soul Radio used back in the 60s. Where the DJ was very much a personality DJ. You didn't last long if you didn't have a bombastic personality. Dr. Bob used to come across on the radio like Muhammad Ali. Mm-hmm. I'm 42 across the chest and twice the lover your husband will ever be. Stuff like that, the braggadocio. And he would often break into records. And he'd make some sly remark, or he'd dedicate the song to somebody who'd called into the studio. And those studios were only about a mile, 2 miles from my house.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And sometimes we'd go over there and hang around and listen to the broadcast right there, hanging outside the studio. And you could hear outside because they'd actually broadcast it outside.
Oh,
so
that's great.
If we wanted to listen, we could. But the interesting thing, and it's kind of a curiosity for me, too, is that my cousin is a fellow by the name of Bill Taylor. Bill was a disc jockey on WOKY radio in Milwaukee, and he later went out to Los Angeles, where he worked on, I believe, KFWB and some of the other LA stations doing Top 40 radio before that format had shifted, I think, eventually to all news. I even read the news out there for a while. Well, Bill always wanted to get into comedy. Mm-hmm. In fact, Bill did a very rare record that I sometimes see on the auction lists for 30, 40 bucks. It's a break-in 45, like Dickie Goodman used to do, and it's Lullaby to Carolyn. He did it as an impersonation of John Kennedy.
Oh, my God.
And he did a very good one. I think it's as good as Vaughn Meter's. And he would lead into these clipped lyrics from the hits of the day. And things like, I don't like it, but I guess things happen that way, or foot stomping. And these would be integrated into the track.
Wow.
Well, at any rate, the record came out, unfortunately, not long before the Kennedy assassination in '63, and that was the end of his attempt to build a career imitating John Kennedy.
Oh, my God.
For obvious reasons.
Yeah.
He wasn't alone in that.
No, yeah, wow.
I don't know if you remember Lenny Bruce's comment the night
yes.
John Kennedy was killed. He did his late night show anyway, and went out on stage, and as the audience sat there wondering what in the world Lenny Bruce could say about this, he took the mic and said, "Damn, poor Vaughn Meter." And of course, that was Lenny Bruce. He was the one guy that could get away with that.
Of course, right.
Anybody else, they would have stoned him, I think.
Yeah,
but,
yeah.
But you sort of expected that from Lenny Bruce. Now, there again, I don't think that's something Dick Davy would have done.
Right, no.
He just seems to have a sort of an ethical guide that, I'm not going to get vicious. I'm not going to go there. I'm not going to be that nasty. But on the other hand, back to Bill's story, Bill went out to L.A. and started doing stand-up in the clubs. And he was heard by somebody who was a producer for the Joey Bishop show on ABC TV. Joey Bishop had a late-night talk show opposite Johnny Carson back about 1967, 68, that era. I remember the show being on the air because I remember watching the Seeds singing "Pushing Too Hard" on the Joey Bishop show. But at any rate, they asked Bill to be on the show, and he was on the Joey Bishop program twice.
Oh, wow.
It was scheduled 3 times, and they ran out of time on one occasion, so he didn't make an appearance. But Bill was on the show, and he was very acquainted with those who were doing stand-up back then. You know, and he's very knowledgeable on Allen and Rossi and Rodney Dangerfield and even the great Henny Youngman, and of course some of the other characters of that time. But I've asked him about Dick Davy. In fact, in preparation for talking to you, I called Bill yesterday, and I said, "Do you remember Dick Davy?" And the fascinating thing to me is he remembered absolutely nothing about Dick Davy.
Okay.
And he does know some of the lesser names who maybe didn't make as big a wave or as big an impact at the time, but he doesn't remember Dick Davy at all.
Interesting.
And I know Dick Davy played L.A. at the time that Bill was living there because his second album is recorded in L.A.
Yeah.
And so he definitely was doing the circuit out there, and he'd be the kind of guy that Bill might have opened for, but he doesn't remember him at all.
That's interesting.
Now, I've since learned also that Columbia, because they were a little worried about some of what Dick Davy would say on that second album, Stronger Than Dirt, they put out, what would be the word, an edited number of tracks. There's a 45 RPM promo for radio stations only, which I have, that has 7 selections on one side and 3 longer selections on the other side, but they're all very short. And it was for something that could be cleared for radio play, that you wouldn't offend anybody, you weren't going to get angry phone calls or letters from listeners. And that was apparently what Dr. Bop was actually playing on the air to keep clear of any trouble.
Okay.
I listened to the 2 albums again yesterday in preparation for talking to you today. And I'll tell you, what's interesting to me is that it's not crude. He doesn't go where Lenny Bruce goes. It's more like a Southern hillbilly Mort Saul is what it is.
For sure, yeah.
But at the same time, he says some things there that would get him in trouble today. There's a little bit there. I think it's from the '66. I think it's from the '67 album, where he says that He says, "Do you remember that Marine who did all that fancy shooting from the tower down in Texas?"
Oh, right.
Of course, he's referring to that very famous university incident where several people were tragically killed.
Mm-hmm.
And he says he didn't get no medal from LBJ. All he got was some lead right back. Seems to me there's no future in private enterprise anymore. You got to work for the government. Well, he was referring to the killing in Vietnam and comparing that to the ex-Marine shooting from the tower. I don't think you could get very far with that today.
No, you're
without
right.
somebody calling you on the carpet. That brings back my pain, or that was very hurtful to me. I'm a relative of some person who was injured. You couldn't get away with doing what Dick Davy did at the time, and it's interesting. I'm still old enough to remember when Dick Gregory spoke at Milwaukee Area Technical College in the '60s, and when there were some edgy comedians brought into Marquette University. Marquette's a Catholic Jesuit institution, but they could be rather topical back in those days, and I taught at Marquette later on for 25 years, from about 1988 to about 2013. So I understand that the atmosphere has changed a lot, and I think Dick Davy was part of a very special place and time. I would love to know. We mentioned when I spoke earlier about the aborted twofer release that had come out and apparently briefly advertised in Collector's Choice CD magazine of his two albums on one CD. I never saw anything further about that. I probably should have ordered them, but I have a hunch they wouldn't have come. I think that was pulled or shelved for whatever reason, and I can kind of imagine what the reason might be. Mm-hmm. And I'd love to know if any of his stuff was ever going to be released on CD. Now, the fact that he's dead, I imagine Sony, which purchased Columbia, owns the right to the tapes at this point. Mm-hmm. But what's going to happen with them, I don't know. It is interesting to me that, number one, he could drop off the face of the earth as totally as he did.
Right.
A fellow who had a website that you know or are acquainted with that mentioned he was at one point, I think, a substitute teacher in Harlem.
Yeah. Yep.
And I don't know about that. But I know that when the comedy book came out, and mentioned 20 years ago that this guy was from New York City. I was shocked because he'd suckered me in for what would that be, 30 years.
Right.
I was convinced this guy was a small town hick from Evening Shade, Arkansas, just as he pretended to be.
Right. Yeah, no, he got us all pretty good. And what's so funny is along every step of the way, even after reading through, something like that, or there's a book called The Last Laugh by Phil Berger that's got an interview with him. Digging through that, even and after speaking to his family, he even told some slightly shifted truths to people who interviewed him, even when he pretended to be entirely truthful, which is fine. I mean, he might have been trying to hide things he didn't think was anybody's business, but it is interesting that he's kind of one big mystery, even when you find out as much as I have found out about him.
Well, your mother always told you could be whoever you wanted to be in life. Here's a guy who lived it.
Yeah, right. 100%.
He took it literally.
Yeah.
And decided, well, this is who I'm going to be. And that's rather interesting to me. The fact that his dad was a rabbi in New York, that certainly explains his knowledge of the Old Testament scriptures.
For
and
sure.
Where he could come up with the lion and the lamb, and that answers that part of the question.
Definitely.
I always just made the assumption it was from sitting in some Pentecostal services down there in Arkansas when he was a kid, but. Apparently, he had it in his own family that certainly a rabbi would know the scriptures and would teach them to his son. Now, did his family say that he'd become so eccentric that when he was with his family, he used that accent?
No. The only person I interviewed that was in his family that knew him super closely was, actually, no, I'm sorry, I'm going to flip that. I did, the person who knew him closest was his widow. They were never married, but she's his widow because they were together for 25 years. And she said no, 100% he would never use the accent. She never heard him use the accent in the 25 years she knew him. So that never. By the time she met him, of course, the act had gone by the wayside. But everybody else had said, no, he was himself when he was with us, which begs the question, what the hell did he sound like? This is what's killing me. I want to hear tapes of him talking as just himself, but those don't exist to the best of my knowledge. I want to know what he really sounded like.
Well, he mentioned in the interview with the Milwaukee Journal that he'd done the Merv Griffin show 6 times. At least. That's what he said. And he said, but I've not been on in the last year because I've gotten too controversial. They don't want me anymore.
Interesting.
And that was an interesting quote. It is true that he just sort of dropped from the airwaves. I know a lot of comedians, after their heyday, they continued doing stand-up and even making records on some smaller or less significant record label. They'd go from a label like Epic or Columbia to a label like Evergreen or Churchill or one of these very, very minor labels. It's sort of what happened to a lot of the crooners and others when they passed their heyday. They'd get a contract with some little label that was hoping to somehow score a hit. Do you know if Dick Davy did any more recording after those 2 albums?
I have heard that nothing about that. I mean, I've very specifically heard, and I read and then confirmed it with his girlfriend, that he essentially quit stand-up after MLK was assassinated. Now, he did do some performances or some appearances here and there that I think were probably more geared towards marches and towards, helping people out. And, whenever he could kind of MC an event that was important to him. But other than that, like straight stand-up, it seems he stopped after MLK's assassination and went back to teaching school full-time.
Huh.
Yeah.
Did you get any corroboration that he actually worked as a school teacher in New York?
Yes, and I've actually since spoken with some people at. I don't know the schools he taught at specifically, but I have spoken with the New York the public school system, and they are doing some digging to let me know what schools he worked at, because I would like to know people he worked with or students he might have affected, because from every story I've heard, he was actually a pretty effectual teacher, even though he was not entirely curriculum-based. He was very freewheeling, as you might imagine.
I can believe that. I had a friend in Chicago by the name of Quinn Brisbane, who was a history teacher in the Chicago Public Schools. And I don't think Quinn knew what a syllabus was, but kids never left his class or skipped his class. They loved listening to the guy because he was a storyteller.
Right.
And I think sometimes that's the best way to get history across. A lot of my colleagues forget that the last word in history is story.
Right.
And they try to hit the kids over the head with nothing but dates. And they lose the interest of the class. But you tell history as a story. Well, hell, those guys who lived those stories, those guys whose lives you're talking about, thought they were pretty colorful people. They thought they were darn interesting.
Yeah.
And I always tell people it takes a professional historian to make them boring, but which it often does. But,
sure.
But I can see Dick Davy in that role. I would think the kids would have loved him in a classroom.
Yeah.
Now, here's a real question for you, and I'm sure you probably don't know yet. It'd be fun to find a couple students who had him. I wonder if he used that accent in class.
That is one of my biggest questions, because in the book, The Last Laugh, Phil Berger, who's interviewing him, says that the accent kind of goes in and out. And I'm now looking back and knowing what I know, I'm like, that actually probably tracks. I will bet he's like, oh, this is my first interview in a few years. Maybe I'll kind of bring out the accent a bit. But I do wonder if that had anything to do with his style of teaching, or if they straight up knew he was just this Jewish dude from the Upper West Side. But I don't know. That is one of the big questions I have, and that's why just one student. All I need to find is one student. They'll know, and that's it's killing me to not know.
Yeah, it's it raises an interesting question. What did Cliff Arquette do to get in character as Charlie Weaver on the Hollywood Squares?
Right.
When he was backstage waiting to go on and getting his makeup on, did he become Charlie Weaver at that point, or was he Cliff Arquette until the moment he walked onto that stage? I don't know.
Yeah.
But to what extent do you have to be the character to be good?
Sure. Yeah.
They always tell the stories about Jonathan Winters, that he got to the point where he couldn't turn it off. Mm-hmm. And his family worried about him because he was Maudie Frickard for 3 straight days. and that could be a little dangerous. I have a feeling that might be what it was like to live with Robin Williams too.
Oh, for sure.
But,
that's what I always imagined.
But creating a character that's that enduring, that you become the character. There's a mastery to that I almost envy. It's very much they interviewed Henry Winkler a number of years ago about his Fonz character and asked him if he was bitter that character had taken over everyone's public assumptions about him, and that when people saw Henry Winkler, they'd point and say, "Look, it's the Fonz." And most actors hate that.
Mm-hmm.
Pernell Roberts left Bonanza because he didn't want to be Adam Cartwright. There's a great hatred of that among actors who believe that if they're really going to hone their craft and develop their skills, they need to be something more than one pat character.
Right.
But Winkler gave a surprising reply. He said, no. He said, people struggle all their lives in this profession to become so utterly recognized in a particular role that no one else could ever play that role, that it becomes synonymous with who they are. And most actors never reach that pinnacle of success. Why would I be bitter about achieving a level of success in my career that few others of my peers have ever achieved?
That's pretty
beautiful. And I thought that was a fascinating response on Winkler's part, that he not only didn't resent being the Fonz to the public, he embraced it.
Yeah.
And that's unusual, because
sure.
A lot of people will say, oh, God, I never should have taken that role because I was nothing else but that role afterwards.
Yeah, I find that interesting.
Tina Louise from Gilligan's Island, she virtually went into hiding after that show. Mm-hmm. She claimed it ruined her career.
Man. Yeah, that's crazy. I mean, maybe Henry Winkler's had the luck of the draw there, where he still got to work after, but still, yeah, what he says makes sense. The idea that, why would you be upset that you had this lasting impact? And I mean, you work in history, and one of the things we talk about a lot on this show is it's kind of inevitable that what I'm talking about is not my legacy, but the legacy of all these different people. I talk with archivists all the time. And like legacy is just is such a huge part of this for people, and I think for actors that's no different. They're probably always concerned with what their legacy is. So he's got his kind of locked in, at least for for the foreseeable future.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
it's such a huge part of it.
It's interesting. Well, I sure am glad to talk to somebody who remembers Dick Davy.
Yeah.
Because, other than myself, no one does. Dr. Bob passed away a number of years ago, and I never got him a chance to ask him about that. There are still some other DJs from that station who are still alive, but they don't remember an awful lot about that era, except the great music they played, which is what it's really all about.
Of course.
Radio. And so it's interesting to me to find out a number of things about Dick Davy. I sure never would have guessed his dad was a rabbi.
Right. I know. Do you? I'm curious. So the reason I found you is you wrote this really great article in a series, from what I understand, about the history of WAWA in the Elm Grove.
Yes, it was a 5-part series.
Yeah. And
actually, we're going to consolidate all 5 of those parts into a chapter on the history of Wisconsin music, which may be published by Marquette Press within the next year.
Wonderful. Oh, my God.
I'm not the editor of the project, so I know nothing about that. But
sure.
I made 5 contributions to that series.
Wow.
One was about what we call Milwaukee's first rock concert, the Dave Clark 5 appearance at Divine's Ballroom in Milwaukee, which was where Buddy Holly had played years earlier. Mm-hmm. And another contribution was on the Coachman, a Waukesha, Wisconsin folk group that really was, I think, for my money, the best folk group to come out of the Kingston Trio era in Wisconsin. And then I wrote this series on WAWA, so hopefully that'll come out. If you need the other copies, I can see if I can get those copied and send them to you if you need the complete history of the station. But
I mean, that'd be
wonderful.
Davy
was only mentioned in one of those installments, and that was the Winds of Change at WAWA, which was back in 2013, and that one you already have, I understand.
I do, and since it's a PDF, I'll hunt and see if I can find the other ones as well, so you don't have to bother.
They should be up online.
They should be, yeah.
They have a website, elmgrove.news.
Okay.
Elm Grove, one word, and then .news, and that's the archive site as well.
Mm-hmm.
So you should be able to find them. If you have any trouble, let me know.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, I did some scanning and Xeroxing for you.
Very kind
and I
of
thought
you.
I'd wait on mailing these till I talk to you today, because I thought you may want some of these and may want some other things I could send. But I'm sending you the Milwaukee Studio Notes column that discusses Dr. Bopp and Dick Davy's presidential campaign, and a picture that went along with it, which is doesn't scan very well, but
right.
You'll see Dick and Dr. Bopp together. It's probably their only shot as a ticket, and sending you also a scan of this Columbia Records radio station 45.
Oh, wonderful.
That is what WAWA would have played to keep them out of trouble with the FCC. And I also have some old WAWA surveys. One of them advertises the services of Dr. Bopp for personal appearances and has a number of interesting records in the top 10. Tell It Like It Is, Aaron Neville, Mustang Sally, Wilson Pickett. Classics, what Dr. Bopp used to call a Dr. Bopp beast. He loved giving the best hits of the day his official confirmation as being a Dr. Bopp beast. Well, the others thing I'm sending, I think you'll find most interesting. I have 4 weeks of the WAWA survey where Dick Davy's Stronger Than Dirt album charted on the album charts.
That's wonderful.
On WAWA. And the album was out by October, but it's charting here very interestingly in December. It's charting in December of '67. And into January of '68. And if we look at where it is here, he's beating out Dionne Warwick, Sam and Dave, and Stevie Wonder.
Oh my God!
And the Miracles. Coming in right behind Jimmy Smith and his Respect album. And the record hangs around. It's on their listener charts and their sales charts here for about 2 months.
Wow. All right. That's impressive.
So, and that record sold well in the Milwaukee area. You could find these. I had no trouble finding copies of these 2 albums when I bought them many years ago.
Do you know, in the article that I found, there's a copy of, so it looks like Dr. Bopp ran 2 different campaigns for president, one in '68, one for '68, one for '72. Do you know, did he make bumper stickers for the first
there
one?
Was no further mention made of Dick Davy or any other running mate.
Right.
In fact, as I recall, Dr. Bopp said he didn't even need a running mate in '72 because he was so boss he should have been twins. Again, he had that bravado. And by the way, when you met him, he was just the kindest, nicest guy. There was none of that that bravado when you met him in person. He was just a really nice guy. And the kids loved him. All the kids loved Dr. Bopp. And just a bigger-than-life character. But on air, he was a tiger.
Yeah. I've heard a couple of the air checks that are on YouTube and stuff, and holy cow, that I can see why you wouldn't stop listening to the guy. Like, he just so much power. Were there actual bumper stickers for his first? Because I'm going to hunt on eBay forever until I find one.
Pick one up for me too if you find one.
Absolutely.
Yes. In '68, he did have buttons and bumper stickers.
Oh man!
My friend Ken Freck has one of the buttons at his oldie shop. In fact, he won't let it out of the shop. I've tried to buy it from him, and he won't get rid of it. Ken would probably be more than willing to scan it and email it to you. At least you'd have a scan of it.
Holy cow!
But I can't get him to part with the thing.
Yeah.
It's a white button with red letters. WAWA's famous Dr. Bopp for President of the United States, 1968.
That's so good.
And it's not a tiny button. It's about the size of a little Badge a Minute button. But it wasn't a Badge a Minute. It was produced by an actual button producer. It's high quality. It's a celluloid button. And he also had bumper stickers. And back in the day, if you sent $1 to the radio station, he'd send you a bumper sticker and a button.
Oh.
Now, I don't have any of those because, like an idiot, of course you can be an idiot at 16, which is how old I was in 68.
Sure.
I didn't send for them, but and I could have. I used to go over to the radio station on Saturdays. I could have easily picked those up, but I never did.
Mm-hmm.
In 72, though, I was wise enough to pick up a couple of bumper stickers, a red one and a green one from his 72 campaign.
Oh, wonderful.
And those I do still have. But yeah, online you might find something like that. Who knows who has that in their collection and is willing to sell it? I always assumed that somebody who worked at that station, O.C. White or Earl Gissing or Phil Klingler or one of those guys, probably has a box in the basement next to the furnace.
Right.
And it's filled with all this memorabilia, and they haven't gone through it in 50 years. And it's going to go in a dumpster the minute they pass on.
I know.
I hate to say that, but that tends to be the end of the lifespan of a lot of that stuff.
I know. Oh boy, that drives me nuts. As a sort of amateur archivist, obviously, and now obsessed with this one particular comedian, my brain is just like, what can I do to fix that problem? Which is nothing, but you hope something happens with it. Oh my God, that's so wonderful. I first of all, I really appreciate you talking with me. I don't know what form this is going to take on the podcast. I think I'm going to do a Dick Davy follow-up because I found a lot of other interesting things that I didn't get to mention on the show. The first one that I did, which is worth listening to. It's a weird, because normally the show is what you and I just did. It's just an interview. But that one is an edited episode where I'm just trying to find who Dick Davy really was. And I ended up finding his real identity almost by chance. It was a freak, and if I hadn't noticed this one particular thing on a website, I would never have found him. But I'm probably going to do some kind of follow-up. What I did want to ask you is, do you think Bill Taylor would be willing to talk on my podcast just about himself? Because I've found his 45 very quickly online, and I would love to. I like to talk to comedians that maybe are not getting interviewed a bunch. Now, what? I'm losing you here.
Oh, sorry. You faded out here about 15 seconds ago, so I didn't get what you said.
Sorry about that. No, I would just love to interview your cousin, Bill Taylor, just in general, because I like speaking to comedians that maybe are not getting interviewed a bunch on the podcast.
Okay.
About his own career, about comedians he went up with, about comedians he likes.
I would suggest... Now, Bill also, he did that 45 Lullaby to Carolyn backed with Income Taxes and You.
I saw that.
I think they're both clever. I think they stand up well. In fact, Dickie Goodman really created that break-in style that was just genius on Dickie Goodman's part. And Buchanan and Goodman put out a number of those break-in 45s. Bill was really following in their footsteps there. But I think his 45, on Citation Records, by the way, that's the same, that was recorded up in Sauk City, and recorded and produced by the same guy who produced the Mule-Skinner's classic hit, the Fenderman's classic hit, Mule-Skinner Blues, which was a big instrumental hit in the early 60s. Well, anyway, that record, I think, is better than Buchanan and Goodman stuff in some ways. It's funny. It's a funny record, and I think it still holds up well. How he integrates the songs into what he's saying, and they're both brief. Both sides of the record are about a minute and 50 seconds, or 2 minutes, and no longer than that. And they're funny sides. But after that, Bill formed a partnership with another disc jockey out in L.A. and went to Era Records. Era Records was run by Herb Newman, the guy that wrote Wayward Wind for Gogi Grant, and he also wrote Birds and the Bees for Jewel Akins under the alias of Barry Stewart. Well, anyway, Herb Newman had this record label out there, Era Records, which had it was a small label, but it had a few hits. And they recorded a comedy album on Era Records. And that comedy album was called Have I Got a Problem?
Wait a minute, that sounds familiar.
And it was a comedy album that dealt with a psychiatrist on a late-night talk show. very much like Frasier, actually.
Uh-huh.
The psychiatrist is taking calls from a variety of listeners, all of whom have, well, shall we say, rather unfortunate problems, to say the least.
Uh-huh.
And an 88-year-old woman calls, and she's got a problem that she's pregnant. And of course, she isn't, and they have to talk her through that. And at any rate, that album is on Era Records, and called "Have I Got a Problem?" And it's by Bill Taylor and a fellow by the name of Edwards, who was his partner. But Bill does all the voices. He does the elderly lady. He does all of the imitations.
Uh-huh.
And I have a copy of the album, but that's on Era, and I think the number, I've got the record in front of me now. I just pulled it from my file here.
This looks so familiar. I've seen
Era
this before.
Number E-603. So if you're looking for Bill's stuff, that one is out there. And if you want to do an interview with Bill, I'm sure he would be amenable to that. Bill would be one of those comedians who's self-assured enough that he wants you to have heard his stuff. So if you're going to do the interview with him, you probably should hear the album and hear the 45 before you do it. And you could talk about the Joey Bishop show. He found Regis Philbin to be very helpful to him, and he's actually toyed with the idea of trying to contact Regis's people to see if he can get kinescopes of those appearances. And I'm not sure what they saved on ABC from the Joey Bishop show, but Bill would love to have copies of his appearances on that show. He also worked with Mickey Finn, with Fred Finn, actually, who had the Mickey Finn show on ABC. And they were asked to tour the Mickey Finn show in the Middle East. And Bill toured that show, believe it or not, in Saudi Arabia.
Really?
Back in the 70s.
Wow.
So, yeah, he would... I think they even did a command performance for the royal family.
Holy cow!
But yeah, Bill would have a lot of interesting memories, and again, I can tell you, I think he's a funny guy.
Yeah,
that's some prejudice, of course, but I've got some of his stuff, and I think his stuff's pretty good. So I can pass on to him that you'd be interested in talking to him.
That'd be wonderful. I'm in the middle right now of trying to hunt it, because you know what's so funny? I'm annoyed because I've had opportunities to buy this album before and I never picked it up. It was probably during those periods when I was poor. But yeah, I'm gonna have to buy this album shortly, and I gotta see if I can.
Bill's still around. He's hale and hearty. He was living in Milwaukee till very recently, and he just moved up north to the area of Appleton, Wisconsin, but he's thinking moving back to Milwaukee in the spring because he's going stir crazy up there. He can't find anything to do.
Yeah, let him know I'm interested, and in the meantime, I will hunt down his work.
All right, and please keep in touch. I'm not
Absolutely.
the easiest guy to reach except by phone. As an old goat, which I've become something of a curmudgeon, and I don't do anything online except for search for things for my own pleasure, as you apparently do as well.
Yep.
But I don't do emails. I still write letters. I've got a 1924 Royal typewriter here that I still bang out my correspondence on. And I find that yes, it is indeed still easy to buy typewriter ribbons, but but I've discovered as an historian, I never need to apologize to anybody for that, because the minute I tell them what I do for a living, they say, "Oh well, you're well equipped for life in the 15th century," and I can get away with this. But if you ever want me, just give me a ring. You've got my home number here, and we do have an answering machine. I have a little bit of high tech, and and I'll get back to you if you ever need me to say any more about Dick Davy, or if you need to facilitate me getting in touch with Bill. I'd be more than happy to do that.
I appreciate it, and I'll probably write you a letter in response to getting that, and at some point, I think we could have a proper discussion about, since it sounds like, you know, you have a great perspective on how comedy parallels history. I think we could have some other lengthy discussions on that. I think that'd be a lot of fun.
Oh, yeah, I'd love to. I'd love to talk about that. You know, I have such fondness for the Alan Sherman albums, the Old First Family album. even the derivatives of that. You know, as a guy who collects that stuff, you probably know. There was another series of albums on Laurie Records called The Other Family.
Yes, I have. I think I have most of those. I think. I could be wrong.
There's The Other Family, and then the follow-up was on Roulette. The Roulette record is at home with The Other Family, and the cast was somewhat different, but it was the same franchise. And there also is a record done by the son of a Cuban exile called The Last Family that came out in both Spanish and English versions, and it's a very nasty satire on Castro.
Really? I've never seen that one.
One of the few that I would call really nasty.
Really?
For that time.
I'm
really
fascinated.
Is a nasty satire.
Huh.
And it was recorded in Spanish and another version recorded in English. And if you look up The Last Family, I believe the gentleman's name was Tito Hernandez. And he was a stand-up comic in South Florida and produced this thing after the first Family album. And it's rather vicious in its digs on Castro, but
interesting.
But those knockoffs of the first Family album were rather interesting.
That's an era I'm particularly fascinated with. I will say another episode last year I'm really proud of is where I interviewed Vaughn Meader's widow, and we spoke at length about his career, but I'm I'm genuinely very fascinated in the other not First Family albums. They're pretty fascinating. Yeah,
it's Vaughn Meader's one guy I wish I had met. Dick Davy's another guy I wish I had met. I'm sorry to hear from you that he's long gone, but some of the greatest times of my life were meeting people like Henny Youngman and meeting people like Marty Allen. Who I met when he was in his 90s, not long before he passed on. He was still doing stand-up and had come to Milwaukee to do a stand-up show at one of the casinos. And just a really great, accommodating guy. But to be able to tell somebody like that, when I was 10 years old, I thought you were the funniest guy in the world. And to be able to say that to him face to face, I mean, I'm not so jaded that I can't admit to being a real fan of these guys.
Right, of course. Oh, that's wonderful. We'll talk shortly about this. Talk shortly again, I think. But I really do appreciate you taking the time to talk to me.
All right.
Thank you so much.
All right. Well, it's great talking to you, and again, good luck with this project. I will listen to these podcasts myself, and I will be very interested in seeing what more you uncover. And in the meantime, thank you for doing this. I think you're doing yeoman's work, because uncovering the story of a guy like this is just fantastic. And given the dual personality here that he created, it's even more fascinating to me. So this is going to make something that I think a lot of people are going to be interested in.
I hope so. And thank you. That's very kind of you. Hauser's perspective as a fan was something I'd been hoping to hear. Someone who didn't know him personally, but got to witness his brief moment in the spotlight. That's another piece of the puzzle you wouldn't think I might need, since there's clear evidence that Davy sold out the Apollo and released 2 records on Columbia. He was quite successful. Thing is, I just wanted that proof. That proof that he was out there and that people heard him. You can read a ton of ads advertising a performance, or read the 1 or 2 in-depth interviews he did, and those things paint a pretty clear picture, but when someone was there in any capacity, it lends some credence to the idea that this person was worth remembering to those people who were invested only in this character he had created. For all they knew, that was the real guy. It rounds things out in the way I was hoping to this whole time. Of course, this still isn't the complete picture of Dick Davy. Along the way, even early on, I found mountains of details that didn't have a place in the last episode or in this one. It's one of the reasons I knew this had to at least be a trilogy. Of course, now it's open-ended. For instance, he'd performed so much on stage, in the theater, that is, non-stand-up performances, that I felt sure I'd find out some more information about them, but no. Right now, I can't find out much else than what he listed as stage credits in his few newspaper articles. I found a ton of music in the copyright records from the 50s and 60s by people named Dick Davy or Richard Hoffman, but a lot of that music turned out to be a gentleman who's still alive and doesn't have a pseudonym. As for the 10-gallon trio, I can't find any of the people involved, just yet. I got one response about a song written by Dick and a gentleman named Herb Wasserman, from Wasserman's son, Ron, also a musician.
My dad was a lifelong New York City raconteur, musician, self-taught, made his living as a musician. In the 1950s, he was doing a lot of songwriting and jingle writing. And they were, back in the day, the way that worked is you would write a song and shop it around and hope for a hit. You know, you'd do a demo recording and hope for a hit. And whoever had an idea for a song, they would be, okay, let's do it. And they'd probably sit down, you know, in a booth at the back of a bar and start working on it. And that's how I'm thinking that these two people got together. I would imagine it's something along those lines.
Ron has told me he'll dig for the sheet music in his dad's old boxes, but so far he hasn't found anything. Hard to say if he's likely to find anything at all, but the stuff is 60 plus years old now. Any work Dick Davy did at the time is increasingly less and less likely to be found. But my goal has been, if Ron finds it, to find some way to get a band to play it, so we can at least get a taste of what it was like to hear Dick's music. Much as I love his comedy, the music part is also very fascinating, if elusive. He was a cantor, then a folk singer, then performed with the 10-Gallon Trio, which I also found out integrated comedic skits with their folk music. The more I think about it, I'm sad that I'll never get to hear him sing. All we can hear of his work, all the recorded audio there is, are 2 comedy albums and some talk show appearances, mostly Merv Griffin, that would be very pricey to license. It's been my dream just to get a taste of that thing that he eventually left in favor of comedy. All right, full disclosure. In August last year, that dream finally came true.
Evening Shade, Arkansas. Just a scrawny hill off Route 11, that's where it is. But I kind of like it there. I got a humpback mule, a plow, and a tater patch eggs that are gonna hatch someday. Got my Lord above and a good girl to love me. I'm the richest man in the world. Thank you, Lord above, for smiling down on me. I'm richer now than any man has any right to be. I got a plow and I got a mule and a girl from Tennessee. New York is nice for a northern town, but it's evening shade for me. I got a humpback.
Next time on the Comedy on Vinyl Family Albums miniseries, I talk with Firesign Theater archivist Taylor Jessen about 2 lost Dick Davy recordings that were recently uncovered, and what he did to clean them up, and what might happen with them next.
One of them, the one that is an acetate that says Dick Davy at the bitter end on June 5th, 1962, he's definitely he's full on board with the Dick Davy character. And what's really interesting about this is that it's in front of a club audience, which I have to assume is a mainly white audience.
Right.
But he's amplifying the fact that he's doing this character that is getting more and more Jewish.
So join me next time. Thanks for listening, and as always, have a good thing. Comedy on Vinyl is a production of StolenDress Entertainment. It is produced by Mike Worden and is hosted and edited by Jason Klom. Our theme song was composed and performed by Richard Levinson. You can email us at podcast@comedyonvinyl.com. You can also send snail mail to StolenDress Entertainment, P.O. Box 805, Burbank, California, 91503. Subscribe to Comedy on Vinyl on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and anywhere else you can find podcasts. Give us a 5-star rating and write us a review. It helps. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Comedy on Vinyl, or find everything in one place at comedyonvinyl.com. A major portion of Comedy on Vinyl has been underwritten by Stand Up Records. Please visit standuprecords.com for all your comedy needs, and tune in to the new Stand Up Records channel available on the Roku, where you can also find select episodes of this podcast. Visit StolenDress.com to listen to our other podcasts, watch videos, and imbibe freely of our multimedia content going back 15 plus years. Dress Entertainment.
Hey, it's my turn.